Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Lilly Anspach. Looking forward to our conversation today, Lilly. Really looking forward.
Yes, me too. Thank you for having me.
So, is Lilly short for Lillian, or is it just Lilly?
It is just straight up Lilly.
It's just
Lily May.
Lily May. Yeah. My dad's mum was a Lillian.
Yeah.
That's why.
I think Lillian is a bit too elegant for me. I'm I'm just straight up Lily.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
she wasn't particularly elegant, my Lillian,
No,
but and
no.
obviously she's old. She's passed a long time ago, but she
Yeah.
was the lady that made the outfit for the teddy bear, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Lily made the outfit for the teddy bear. So she's the one that thinks that blue and brown go together.
Yeah.
Like,
It's funny. I like
maybe it
it.
was just the last bit of the rolls of the wool. So
Could
enough
be.
of this frivolity. Um, let's talk healing. What does healing mean
Let's
to you, Lily?
ah. So I love that question, and I think that I've thought about it 100 different ways. But really, I would say in this moment right now in my life, healing for me is just kind of like snapping out of the trance of trauma, right? Oh, your trauma puts you in a trance, and it's kind of snapping out of it and getting your head out of the clouds of it and really taking your life back. Um, the other day I read a meme as I was scrolling through Instagram or something, and it said something about being adopted as a job, right? Your job, you know it, whether it's implicitly told to you or not. You know your job is to fill the void in the family, comfort their pain, be who they need them to be, protect them from their loss. Keep your needs quiet, be respectful. You're playing a role, and I think we all know that's traumatizing. And so kind of coming out of the trance of doing that and saying, well, okay, I don't have to be that anymore. So who am I really? And how do I take my life back? And how do I take my true self back? And I think that's kind of wraps up what healing is for me, whether that be from adoption or other trauma or anything. It's coming back home to yourself.
Yeah. There's not much there to talk about. I think that's about wrapped up. We'll just go short.
Right. And that's so simple, right? Just come back home to yourself. Just find out who you really are. I mean, what could be hard about that?
Yeah, indeed. Um,
Yeah,
did you feel that being adopted was a job?
I did. I was very well aware of that job. Yeah. I and it's interesting because I think so many of our natural abilities that maybe are good and generative and useful outside of trauma get intermixed with trauma, right? So I'm I like to perform, like, right? I'm an artist and I'm a musician and I like to perform. And so that was innately in me anyways. And so there was a need for me to perform a role in the family and I was good at it. And so, right. And so I did that and I picked up on it and I was that and yeah. And so it's interesting and I think that's what's so interesting when you start to unpack all of your history is untangling it isn't so simple, right? It's enmeshed. The good things about you and the bad things about you, or the things that don't serve you and the things that do serve you, they're all kind of intertwined in a pretty, for me anyways, they have been in a pretty interwoven kind of tapestry, and you don't throw everything out. you know you sometimes some of the traits that you had that caused you a lot of trauma, when redirected and pointed in the right way, can actually cause you a lot of success and happiness in your life too. So it can be confusing, picking through that.
Yeah. Did you feel it was a
It
hard
was for
job?
me.
Do you feel it was a hard job? It was an onerous job. Did you kind of what's the word? Did you resent that job?
I don't know if in the moment I resented it, but in the moment I knew it wasn't right. Did that make sense? Like, I think there was a part of me that was grateful that I could. but I knew that I shouldn't have to. There was always a little wise part of the little me that was like, this isn't right, and I knew that I was doing things to survive. And I was abused in my family too. So it wasn't just the adoption and the role. It was like, okay, I've got to do these other things too to survive, and I've got to get through this. And it almost became gosh, a game. Well, it was a game of survival, right? And so I would think that there was parts of me that was really grateful that I could, but I definitely knew I shouldn't have had to. I was very well aware of that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of doing things here, and then there's also some being things, it strikes me. Right? So the doing, you're talking about the performing the job, filling the gap, keep it surviving. And then you've got the identity stuff as well, kind of mixed in to the into the way that you see it. What do you see in the kind of that identity? Did that make sense?
A little bit. So when I was growing up in that home, the things that felt me, like my soul, my true real identity, were not, well, obviously they weren't mirrored, right? And not only were they not mirrored, but they were actually deeply frowned upon, right? A lot of the traits that I look at in myself now and love and admire were definitely not loved and admired in my home, and was tampered down. And I was always having to conform to something that didn't fit with my soul, right? And so then there was this fissure in me, like, because when you're little and you're young and you're developing and your brain doesn't know yet, you think, well, these people, it feels wrong, but they also are adults and they're in charge, and I must be wrong. And so there's this, there's this fissure, right? Like, well, something must be wrong because my mom didn't keep me. And then something must be wrong because everything that spurs out of me naturally and feels good is not welcomed in this family. And then there was a religion component on top of it. It was like, well, you were born bad, right? So there was all this, the whole world was telling me that I was wrong, that I was bad, and that I wasn't right. And it wasn't just people verbally saying that, it was all the systems around me saying that, the adoption system, the religion system, there's something fundamentally wrong with you. And you can only fight that as a young person so long before you kind of agree with them. And you're like, yeah, I must be really messed up and really broken. And then by the time I did survive, I believed that. So I went into my adulthood thinking I really thought in adulthood, my job was to fix everything wrong with me, right? And I spent 25 years, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And working my butt off to systematically try to fix all the things that I had internalized were wrong with me. And then there was that moment when I was like, oh no, it's not what's wrong with me, it's what happened to me. And because these things happened to me, I have some stuff I gotta fix. But it's not me that's broken, right? It's not me. I was never wrong. I was never sin. I was never, like and it fell perfectly in line with the unwed mother, the sin of having a child out of wedlock. It fell right in with the cultural narrative of you're born into sin and you have to, the Christian adoption narrative is really tricky, right? And me just really coming out of the trance of that, because I would outwardly say I didn't believe it. Like if you would have talked to me, I would have intellectually said, oh no, and I would have given you all the feminist or postmodern reasons that wasn't true. But in my soul, I actually still believed it. And that's why I was stuck for so many years, is because there was a difference between the intellectual person of me and the actual deep feeling part of my soul that still kind of believed that they were all right, that I was wrong, that I was broken, and that there was something wrong with me.
Right. So the difference between how you thought and how you felt.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And just that disconnect and almost not believing that I could integrate the two, right? Sometimes I was aware of it, sometimes I wasn't. Sometimes it was a conscious understanding, and many times it wasn't. And I think that's why I spun around for so many years trying to do all the things that you were supposed to do to heal, but then really understanding that I wasn't healing the way that I needed to.
And
And a bit of an overemphasis on my responsibility in it too, right? So over the last couple years, I've really come to the knowledge that, hey, a lot of this trauma caused my brain to develop differently than other people's brains, and I might need actual chemical help with some of that too, right? And once I understood that and got that chemical help, it's like, oh, okay, now the wires in my brain are firing right, and I can actually take advantage of all of this learning that I've accumulated over the years and make the connections. And kind of, before I started getting medical help, it was like my brain was a wheel stuck in mud. It would just spin around and go around and around. And now I'm out of the mud and I can actually go somewhere. My wheel is productive. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. I want to go back to the abuse thing, because I think the biggest mentor I've had in my life over the last, I've had loads of mentors and coaches come and go. But the biggest one that's been at the start of the journey, like 17 years ago, and then still now every 6 months or so. She was abused at home by a dad, and a dad also abused. She wanted to be adopted, right? She went to court to get out, but the court wouldn't take her away. So, and a dad also abused her mum as well. And, like that for me is like, if you can get through that, you can kind of get through anything. It seems a completely different level of shit show compared to my life.
Yeah, but also the skills you learn to survive aren't the skills you learn to thrive. There's a difference, right? There's survival and getting yourself safely out of the situation. But if you don't learn new thriving skills, then it's almost like maybe that situation isn't still happening, but you're still living as if it is in some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You're still living in the fear, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to educate yourself and learn about it too, right? There's a whole bunch of understanding. Like, I didn't know that, oh, this response was because I was triggered, right? And this is what a trigger is, and this is why it happens, and this is, how, again, all these things I just thought were core defects in me, that was just me, right? And I'm like, oh no, those are results of things that happened to you. And they're the way your body and mind has been conditioned to react, and you can stop and make a different choice, and you can educate yourself and learn why that's happening and deal with the trauma that made that happen so that you can make a different choice. But I was stuck for years in intellectualizing part of it. I wasn't really truly allowing the feeling and the grieving and letting it really, really touch me. I was still in this whole, like, it's not going to touch me thing. And I think for years I thought, if I actually surrender to it, I will actually die. I'll die, or they will win because they got me. But really, there wasn't any winning. The worst thing already had happened to me, right? And so breaking past that you know what I'm trying to say. Making it intellectual and actually really feeling it and coming into contact with that grief then was really important for me to move past it. I couldn't keep avoiding it or pushing it away or saying this cannot happen. I had to actually go to the bottom and let it try to consume me and realize that it couldn't.
Yeah.
And it didn't. It
It
didn't
didn't.
then, and it can't now. So now I have some agency and some power to say, all right, I'm actually in control in a different way than I was before. And I can propel myself forward.
Yeah. But wasn't the survival method, that wasn't the survival thing, instinct, wasn't that the thing that was keeping the trauma at arm's length, was it? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And
yeah, and it's all the things you do, right? Like, I mean, and then there's other little traumas along the way that you just have those automatic responses, and then you realize that that's not helping you, as an adult in the free world where you're not, yeah. So you have to learn about that and unpack it all and reverse it. And again, the tenacity that was a part of me is still a part of me. So I can take that natural born tenacity and intellect and passion, but steer it in a different direction, right? And I don't have to survive anymore. I get to choose to thrive. And not only is that possible, but it's actually my natural state. That's where my body, my heart, my mind, my soul, my spirit, that's where we're supposed to be. And that's what I think healing really is reconnecting with your core source of goodness. And yeah.
the tenacity, that's a word that I think describes so many of us. We kind of
Yep.
and
Yeah.
yeah, I did my second face-to-face somatic experiencing session yesterday, and I just started crying.
Yeah. Right.
And it was kind of connected to the tenacity thing. I would say it was like the hard charging, like not charging money, but charging, just like the relentless. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I totally understand that. I so identify with that. And that's the thing that I think is tricky, right? Because that gets us success in life, right? And so I don't want to completely, dissolve that personality trait, right? I just want to point it in the path of health versus, again, that thriving versus surviving. So if you can point that tenacity and learn to balance it, right? Because we don't have to be on all the time. We used to, right? We used to, but now we don't. And it's learning when to turn it on. And when I used to think that if I let go for a second, I would lose everything, right? It just felt that like I had that kind of grip. Like if I let go of my tenacity, if I let go of my pushing, if I let go of my controlling, if I let go of, and I always had, that it's all going to just fall apart. And if I relax a little bit, I'll die. And it turns out it's like that. Somebody told me once, you can't hold water with a closed fist because it squeezes out. But if you've got your hand open and it's cupped gently, you can hold a lot. And coming home to that balance between the two, of rest and pursuit, and that there's a time and a season for both. But I didn't ever have that rest because as soon as I let my guard down, something bad was going to happen. And it did, right? But that's not the truth now, 40 some years later, right?
So it sounds like all this stuff was revving up for one big moment, but was it one big moment, or was it one big moment and a series of little moments? Is it what does this look like? Does the sticky before and there isn't a sticky before and a joyous happy ever after, is there? I don't know. What does it look like for you?
I work in the field of continuous improvement. And I would always, when I would go into these companies and these organizations, mostly manufacturing companies, I would always teach them about the principles of continuous improvement. And I would say, hey, you know what? If your performance graph goes from here to here, but it's like this, I don't care that it ended up here, because in the end of the day, you're not going to be able to sustain that, right? What I'd rather see is a small change and have it plateau and get steady for a while to prove that you were able to integrate and sustain the change that we made to get you an improvement in your performance. And then I want to see another little step change. I'd rather see like a stair step in your performance graph rather than a
Ziggy's idea.
even though it goes in the general upward direction. And that's how I could tell the health of a business or the health of their stability of their processes. And I think a little bit of that applies to our healing journey too, because before I really understood all of this, I was doing a lot of that up and down and up and down, right? And I would get what I thought was well, or integrate a new strategy or learn a new thing, and I would get a high, but it would inevitably run out and I would bottom out. And then I would kind of come back and I'd go up again, and then I'd bottom out. And after about 3 or 4 times of that, I was really personally convinced that I'm not fixable. And that was in the last year, where I was just like, I'm 47 years old. I can't do it. There's nothing left for me to do. And I became deeply suicidal. And that's when I made some of the physiological changes and did some things. And now that I'm on the other side of that, I'm much more in that improve a little bit, stabilize, improve a little bit, stabilize. And it's almost like these little baby steps. On paper, they don't seem like giant leaps, but they're categorically much more effective and efficient, and have propelled me more holistically into healing than I was before. It's not St. Elmo's fire anymore. It's actually real. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. I used to think that I used to talk about this as well, like the healing curve, like the learning curve is like the healing curve. Well, it's not a curve. It has got those step changes in it, But then I've started, so I finished, get a bit geeky. So it actually depends how close you're zooming in on what your level of magnification is, right?
Right.
So what do you think the upward movements are? What do you think? What do you think the steps are? We know it's a step change on the graph, but what does that what does that represent in terms of something non-graphical, something akin to?
Yeah, well, for me, it's when I think about it as, again, I'm kind of scientific minded, right? So I think about it as a problem solving circle. You plan, you do, you check, you act, you experiment. Like, you're constantly in this circle of experimentation. Does this work? Does somatic therapy help? Does talk therapy help? Does a medication help? Does rewriting my story help? What things work? And I think that's part of why it's so difficult to talk about healing universally, even in a group as specific as adoptees, is because it's also very unique for every individual person. But I do think there's a bit of a formula to it. Like, we all learn in healing that, oh, I'm triggered and I need to learn why I'm triggered, what was the cause of it, and then some strategies to make sure, in the future, if I put myself in a situation like this is how I strategize and I can get through it. But I think sometimes what we don't talk about enough is that those strategies from the triggers or the things that threaten to throw us off course really come from this other piece that we don't talk about as much as these glimmers, right? We talk about triggers all the time, but do we talk about glimmers? What are the pieces of your life that really, those moments of awe, those moments of joys, those little things that just make you feel alive in life, the things that say they're micro moments that cause mood shifts in you, when you recognize, hey, I feel like I think I want to feel, right? The ease, the contentment, the cues to our safety in our nervous system. And so I think that for me, healing is being really, really focused on those glimmers. And they're the key to unlocking all my strategies for my triggers, right? So, I know that I have a problem with ruminating thoughts. I have a problem with regulating some of that. And when I get into that spiral, medication helps a lot, but when I still do get into it, I know that I have activities that regulate me, right? I do pottery, I do quilting, I run, I do things that kind of release some of those natural chemicals in the brain that make us at ease and contentment. I love that when I sit down at a pottery wheel and I try to center some clay and make a vase or a bowl, that my brain doesn't have any space to think about trauma, right? All it's thinking about is what I need to do to center this clay, to make it into something beautiful. And then the sense of satisfaction of struggling with it, right? So you've got to kind of fill your life with those things. And those are the things that make our souls come alive. And those are the keys to sustainability and health.
Yeah. Two things on that. I love the glimmers versus triggers, because glimmers sounds like you're focusing on the growth, and triggers sounds like we're focusing on the negative stuff, right? And obviously, as everybody says, what we focus on gets bigger, da-di-da.
Right.
So you're thinking on that. The other side, the other part that you talked about, the creative stuff, there is no I did an interview with a neuroanatomist called Jill Bolte-Taylor recently, right? And she would say, well, you said there's no room. There's no room when you're making a pot, right? There's no room for the trauma. Well, it's actually, it's a different side of the brain, right? So the left brain is where the judger is, the self-critic is, and the traumatized inner child is basically all in the left. Whereas the creative, the right brain, that's where the creative guy goes. That is the creative space. So that's for some reason. Somebody just sent me an email. A guy who's coming on the podcast next month. He sent me an email because I'd been talking to him about somatic stuff, and he said, look at this guy. Look at Peter Levine, and I tried to listen to his book, Peter Levine, Tigers or something, and something about tigers, and it didn't gel for me, because somatic stuff is body stuff.
Right.
It's not head stuff, right? So he's got a challenge there, right? How can you talk about stuff that is body stuff? It's somatic experiencing, isn't it? Right. So, but the kind of the winning combination for me at the moment is the somatic stuff with the somatic therapist, right? But putting that together for with the logic of Jill Bolte-Taylor's stuff. Like, like, because everybody says, whether they're adopted or not, I've got this voice in my head that tells me that I'm not good enough. I've spent a lot of time healing with non-adoptees, and they've all got that too. But ours is our belief has got steel running through the concrete. Right, it's reinforced.
It's reinforced.
It's reinforced. It's reinforced, and we're not going to. Anyway, but there is an actual part of the left brain that does that. It's not just. It sounds like, oh, it's a metaphor. It's it's a story. It's a tale, but no, there is Jill Bolte-Taylor, who is a neuroanatomist, neuroscientist. She says no, that there is a bit there. That's what it does. So the combination of kind of somatic and that's kind of what works for me. And you're so right. You're talking about trying as you were talking about everybody's healing being different, what was coming to me was I was thinking about business metaphors as well,
Mhm.
and the fact that everybody's looking for the silver bullet, and there is a silver bullet in business. Try some new stuff, see if it works. If it works, do more of it. If it doesn't, don't do it anymore. And that's
Plan, do, check, act. It's the scientific method. It truly is that, right? I mean, it is like, hey, I don't like the result I'm getting. Let's try something different based on some good theories, some good ideas we have. And then let's check the result, readjust based on the result we got, and do it again, right? And that's why healing, people talk about healing being a spiral sometimes too, right? Like yeah, right. But it is truly just that scientific problem solving matter, and the relentless pursuit of it eventually leads you to success, right? If you believe in your soul that I'm good and that the world is good and love is it, then you got to be on the relentless pursuit of getting in connection of that, and everybody is going to find the different exact formula for themselves. And there are some universal tenets that point us in the same direction, but it is a deeply personal, individual journey. And I think that it's all about being balanced too, right? If you want to you can't deny that there's trauma. You can't deny that your nervous system has been wired a particular way in result of the trauma, and you're going to have these triggers and these responses and these maladaptive behaviors. But you can't think your way out of them. You can't intellectualize your way out of them. You have to come up with a strategy that is both. It's yin and yang. I learned, I understand, I have the cognitive grasp of it, but now I have to embody it in some way, shape, or form, and through some kind of, and that's why I love the trigger glimmer thing, right? Because the pointing to your healing is, where are those tiny moments that spark your joy? When was the, like, think about in the last couple of weeks, what was going on when you had just this inner calm, or you had this moment of awe, or you felt safe, you know? And that's the clue to your healing. Do more of that, right? And then understand the neurobiological aspects of what's happening. And, when you're deeply involved in something that brings you joy, there's no brain processing power for all the ruminating thoughts of all the things that you think ruined you, because you're not ruined. You've got some glitches up there you got to work on, but you're not ruined.
no. Couple of things. What about what we say to somebody, that an adoptee that says that they can't heal?
Well, I'm a change management expert, right? I help companies go through change management. And the very first thing that we teach you is that in order to have different results, you have to have different beliefs, right? So if you really believe that you can't heal, you won't. And I'm not judging the person for believing they can't heal, because likely they haven't seen examples of people who can or did, or they haven't been inspired yet, right? And so I just think that, yeah, if this is what you believe, then you won't have a different outcome. You have to change your beliefs in order to change your actions. And so I think that's why it's so important for us to tell our stories about how we have healed and what has worked for us and the hope on the other side, and that it is real and it's not a St. Elmo's fire burst on the horizon, that there is true lasting. And I've just been fortunate in my life to see examples of that, both in the adoption community and outside of it. And you just gotta love yourself and believe in yourself enough to just refuse to stop until you find the key that unlocks it. But I believed it was possible. But if you don't, not much you can do about it.
So here's another one that I've been thinking about at the moment is, do we feel, do did you used to feel traumatized all the time? Or were the glimmers even in the darkest moments? In the darkest
glimmers were definitely there even in the darkest moments. Now, whether I recognized them or not in that moment, but if I looked back, I remember one of the things that heals me is nature, right? My adoptive parents were not nature people at all, right? But one year they had some friends down south and they drove us through the Smoky Mountain National Park. And I'll never forget as a child looking out my window and what I felt, right? That was a glimmer. That was a point. And then I found my biological family. It turns out they're all mountain Appalachian people, right? Like, so that clue was there for me as a little child. And I didn't recognize it. Like I wasn't 9 years old saying, oh, I'm connected to this landscape because this is in my heritage or this is a natural passion for me. But I do remember that. And then when I found trail running and camping and hiking and all these kind of things. And I fell in love with the region that I'm actually from before I even knew I was from there. Those were there. They were inside of me. They were pointing me home all along.
So what Jill Bolte Taylor is pointing to is, and the book is called Whole Brain Living, is that we have four, she says 4 parts to the brain, right? So it's not just left and right, left and right. It's left thinking, left feeling, right thinking, right feeling. There's 4 parts. So when we're feeling, I even in my darkest stuff, I'd say never feel. There's always glimmers. I'd be with you like you, right? Always be glimmers. And that's when we're in a different part of our brain. So she talks about it as 4 characters. So we talk about character. What can you tell me something about if you're interviewing somebody for a new role within your change management? Like, can you tell me about your character, or can you tell me about personality? Or we all assume that there's one, and that there isn't. There's 4 at play. At any time, at any one of 4 at play at any one time. So we've got she encourages us to give our characters names, right? So the character 1 is the control freak, right? So I call him Robin. So I met this guy once he looked like a tank commander, right? Looked like a tank, right? So he always in control, like a type A behavior personality, right? So I call him Robin, right? Number 2, so this is left brain is the wounded child. It's the inner child, what people call the inner child. So I call him David because that was my birth name, right? So he's the one that doesn't know what's happened.
Yeah.
He's like, number 3, I haven't got a name for yet, but number 4 is I call Rupert because he's the expansive Rupert Spira guy that I mention all the time, who is who is the universe, who is that expansive true self that you've alluded to each time. Right? So what's actually happening is we don't feel. I don't think we feel trauma all the time because the trauma is in Simon. Sorry, in David, character 2.
David.
And so there's a mass oversimplification that the mass oversimplification we say, well, we're like, because we're not one character all the time. Everybody. Some people are more introvert than extrovert, but they'll be more extroverted with people that they know, won't they? I mean, it's like there isn't it'll be different. Some people are different at work and at home. Some people are different with adoptive parents than they are with bio parents. Some people, we're all playing a game. So anyway, that was just.
But how interesting! So what I think is interesting to me when I think about my 1 and 2 on my left brain, I think about the worst of me has always been, remember I told you that tight holding on, super controlling, because the wounded one and the control freak are trying to run the show.
Yeah.
And the mystery person, right? That's why I think, there's so many parallels to healing, as there are to just basic change management in business, right? The people the leaders who I find to be the most influential and successful are the ones that have the most amounts of curiosity and who are not attached to having the answer. That they know that their actual job is to ignite the best in the people around them, to facilitate really great discussions, and then help thread through the best choice. And so if we're not doing things that activate inside of us, that part of us, then these guys get to run the show. And when these guys run the show, we end up in really bad places. Like I have I've ended up in really bad places, right? And I do want to really acknowledge and give grace to the fact that when you have really developed this side, it's deeply terrifying to allow that other side. Because, to be honest with you, like my life may not have been perfect, but I was alive and I was making money and I had a general resemblance of a healthy life, even though inside I was tormented, right? And so if I was going to let this side in on the game, was I going to lose all that? It's scary. And it's the same, in non-trauma situations. Like if you want to make a step change in business, you got to do something you've never done before. If you really want to have some kind of a breakthrough in your healing, you've got to be curious. You got to be out there listening, learning, following your glimmers, being willing to try something that you've never tried before. Be willing to do something that you think is going to kill you, because that's probably the thing that's going to heal you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet we have something struck me on Monday after. So we're doing this on a Wednesday, listeners, right? Something that hit me on Monday is like all this stuff that we're given, right? It's trauma education. It's not healing education, is it?
Right. Yeah. And trauma education is an important piece, but it's only a piece. Yeah, right. And that's what I was saying before when I went from what's wrong with me to what happened to me. All of that was the intellectualizing side of it, that left brain side of it, that 1 and 2 personality. When you start to actually feel and grieve and experience and practice and experiment and live and get honest with all of it, then you have an opportunity. But if you're over here just dissecting, ruminating on, and finding 15 million ways to describe the trauma, then you don't open the opportunity for this other side. Or if you don't believe you're healable, if you feel your wound is primally fatal, then you don't have this on the other side. So it's a necessary first step, but we've got to evolve past that and move into, okay, now that I understand, what am I going to do about it?
Yeah. So why isn't there more healing education? Why are we stuck in this trauma education?
Well, I think for adoptees, because I've been thinking about this a lot too. I think for adoptees, so much of it is our need to be seen wound is so deep, right? And I think we're ruminating on the trauma and redescribing the trauma and telling the stories of our trauma over and over because we just really want somebody to fucking see it, right? Well, it's because it is so disenfranchised. And it's not just disenfranchised in one system, it's disenfranchised across multiple systems that we live and work in. And so I think so many of us are still trying to say, don't you see me? Don't you see me? But here's what happened to me. I realized that the only person that needed to fucking see me was me. It didn't matter how much anybody understood my trauma. It didn't matter how many times I told my story, because the truth of it is, even my husband, who I've been married to for 26 years, who's the most intimate person in my life, even he can't really understand it. And do you know how freaking lonely that is? But you got to feel that loneliness, right? You got to understand, you know what? There's nobody in the world that's ever going to know but me. And I'm going to have to just be okay with that and feel that loneliness, feel that desperation, and then move on. Because if you're trying to get somebody to see it or feel it or empathize with you, you know, in community, we can get, 75% of the way there. But even all of us, in all of our stories of adoption and various different traumas, there's always different subtleties that, and everybody's personal experience is just so like their own fingerprint, right? And it's yours, you own it. You got to come to terms with it and be your own best friend, be your own seer, see yourself. And then once you do see yourself and acknowledge it, then you probably have space to move on.
Yeah. So what do you think stops us healing?
Fear of letting go of the coping mechanisms and the way we've learned to survive all these years. I think fear, I think disbelief that we really do deserve and are worthy and capable of the thriving piece, right? And I think not enough examples of the thriving, right? I think we need to celebrate and show more of our successes, of our joys, of our glimmers, of all the ways that we've taken back our lives and we've become our own people and we've used agency. And I think there's more and more of that happening, I see a lot. The folks that I'm connected with or drawn to are doing that. And I just think we need a lot more of it to give folks a picture and a model of what's next.
Yeah. So do any particular healing moments come to mind for you, Lily?
Many, many, many.
Just pick
I know the birth of my daughter and the process of watching her grow, parenting and witnessing her life has been profoundly healing for me, because I have in front of me something that I made, an example of how easy and natural it is to parent right. Do you know? And how exactly none of that was my fault, right? I did not at age 3, 5, 7 do anything to deserve any of the stuff that happened to me. And to see that in her, to look at her and wonder, what kind of monster would you have to be to do the kind of things and say the kind of things that I needed that. Well, I didn't know I needed it, but it's been brilliantly beautiful to reflect and watch and see her innate goodness and how you have to work really hard to break that down. And that helped me a lot to understand, yeah, it wasn't me. I think that's been not just one moment, but a series of multiple moments that have helped deepen my understanding and integrate some of the intellectual lessons into heart moments,
Yeah.
And honestly, some other have been the darkest places. The places where I was like really believed that my family, my daughter, the world would be better without me. That, and being rock bottom and admitting I was there, and surrendering and getting help, and saying, I can't do it. I need help. I need somebody to help me, and then listen to them.
So seeing your daughter's goodness helped you see your goodness.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And not just her goodness, but just like also how simple and easy parenting really could have and should have been, and maybe that's because I'm biologically hers and I don't have any idea what it's like to be an adoptive parent. And I know that it's hard for them too. I know they have a lot of problems and difficulties and they've been robbed of a child of their own, and I get it, right? And so I understand they have their own journey and process that I don't fully understand. But when I look at some of her behaviors that I remember behaving, is doing a certain thing, and the response that just naturally welled up in me versus the response that I got, it was like, oh, not just her goodness, because even in her orneriness or her badness or her low moments, how easy it is to see her as a person, to choose to give her compassion and respect and extend agency to her so that she can learn and grow in a safe, healthy environment, right? Like there's rules, we have rules, but you're always emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and physically safe here, period. And many of us as adoptees, whether we were abused or not, didn't have that. And I didn't have to read a book to learn how to do that. I didn't have to go to a fucking class. Nobody had to teach me. I didn't have to learn, right? It's natural. And so again, for me, it's not about blaming, but it's about understanding that something was really, really wrong with these people that made them not behave in what's a very natural way, even for somebody who was, right? Like, people always talk about how abuse is generational. And I've always read these things about how difficult it is to be the person to stop it. I don't think it's hard at all. I think it's like really, really, really easy, right? Like, don't do horrible things to people. I think that's pretty fundamentally easy.
Yeah.
So I think what it did was, it kind of helped me understand it wasn't you. It wasn't you. There was something really, really wrong there that caused them to behave in the way that they did. And it's not your job to fix them, to understand them. It's your job to see in your daughter the innate wholeness and goodness and recognize that you were that too, and you still are. And that guides a completely different path forward.
Yeah. So let's talk about the identity piece then. What does that mean to you?
It's identity is the expression of my glimmers, right? The things I'm naturally drawn to, filled with awe, filled with joy, the things that make me excited, the things that make me me, and the elimination of shame around any of those, right? So I'm a talkative, gregarious, excitable girl, right? I have a lot of passion. And I shouldn't be ashamed of that. That's actually one of my gifts, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I don't have to be anything for anybody but for myself. And so if I'm putting a mask on or playing a role, it better be serving me and not serving somebody else, right? So it's falling in love with yourself and realizing that, there's no such thing as the perfect person. There's just who you are. And that's kind of what it is to me. It's not a role, it's not a title, it's not a position, it's not a place in the family, it's not a adjective. It's just your essence, what your soul and heart and mind is drawn to, and what makes you happy and what makes flow and ease surround you.
So is it cutting, as you were talking about half an hour or so, you're talking about religious stuff, the system stuff, the abuse stuff, and I wrote down bad, right? So it seems to me like the elimination of shame is
Huge for me.
Penetrating those 4 or 5 layers of badness that was in the way. What is it? What does it feel like? Is it is it unpeeling those layers? Is it seeing through? Is it seeing through the false belief that of the badness? What does it look like? Give me a metaphor that, or any sort of explanation that is not me trying to put my stuff on your stuff.
I guess what initially came to my mind as you were talking is that I don't need to punish myself or rein myself in or hyperanalyze and correct that, like, what comes from and through me is on purpose and right, instead of something that I have to filter, fix, adjust, mend, twist for a consumer out there, right? There's no consumer out there. This life is just mine. I came into the world by myself. I'm going to leave by myself. And granted, I have family and friends and community around me that I get to share moments of it, but truly, it's me, and there's nothing that piece of letting go of shame. Even right now, I'm trying to figure out, what was I ashamed of again? Right? Like, existing. Truly, it was so core, cellular, that just living felt like it was something that should be fixed. I don't know how to describe it, but it was really, really deeply cellular for me for so many years. And even I disguised so much of my healing. Like, that's why so much of my healing didn't work, because it was still through that filter lens of, gotta fix what's wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. No, 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 no. Things happened to you that have caused certain uh, uh, traits or activities or responses or things, and you need to understand that, and you can make a different choice if you want to feel better. But if you don't want to feel better, you don't have to, right? Like, I don't know.
So if I sum it up in a sentence,
Uh-huh.
and
I wish you would, because I can't.
well, yeah, we can take a pot shot at my sentence, right?
Sure.
So it's moving from self-improvement to self-recognition.
Yeah. And yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So we look at it as like project work, self-development, right? There's something wrong with me. I've got to do it. And, so you may be thinking this, but yeah. I'm just going into a sales pitch for a self-development program. How they, I used to feel like you. I used to feel like you. But until I discovered X, Y, and Z. And if you spend this much money with this much time with me, then I'll help you.
Right.
Best version of yourselves, right? Of yourself,
Right.
and it's only $1,000. Some guy said this to me. He did this to me like 12 years ago, right? I went. So I had the idea I was going to do some coaching, right? So I went to see this guy and I told him about my idea, and I'd seen this guy before, and he'd charged me 50 quid, and so £50, and he'd given me some really insightful moments, and I bumped into him, and I went back to him. Anyway, I went to see him in his little office, and I told him about my plan, and he said, well, no, no, you can't, you're not ready for this, Simon. I can sort, we can sort this out. I can do this, but you need to have skin in the game, Simon, to do this. And you need to take, so I will work for as long as it takes, and it's going to be £12,000. And I just thought, right, I'd seen the guy 8 years before, so suddenly he's gone from £60 an hour to £12,000. This doesn't sound right. And he was gaslighting me into a sale.
For sure.
I'm I can be, I can be a little bit. I'm easily influenced, you know. But I went home thinking about this, and no, and then I got to that realization that no, he was just playing he was playing a con.
Yeah.
He was playing a con on me.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's the story behind.
I mean, just think about how many. I mean, forget adoption, but just think about how many industries are completely sustained on the idea that something's missing, something's wrong. You know, you need to be better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of money in it.
There's a lot of money. So I was thinking about that when we're talking about the silver bullet for business, and you talked about your process, the quality improvement or whatever, outcomes improvement process, TQM, total quality management, whatever it is. And like, so if you're McKinsey, you can't really charge 50 million quid, $50 million, $60 million for a change management project and just show one slide, right? We're going to do some things. We're going to see what works. We're going to do more of that. We're going to see what doesn't work, and we're going to do less than that. Please pay us 50 million to do this. Please
and lots of businesses do.
So they
okay, so this is off topic, but when the answer is already in the business, the people there already know, right? They just need help getting their voices heard and need systems in their own business so their voices can be heard, because there's no expert outside of your business. There's no expert outside of yourself that has the key, right? You have to filter all the information and take bits and pieces of it and use your own discernment and follow your glimmers towards, hey, this works for me. You know, I don't think every adoptee is going to end up being a ultra trail runner, right? But that's a really significant piece of me staying healthy and staying happy and a part of my identity and a part of my regulation. So again, there's happy, healthy, regulated moments of all, but it's going to be completely different for Simon than it is for Lilly, right?
Yeah. I'm a runner. I'm a swimmer, not a runner, so I wouldn't do the running thing. Right. But as a kid, I wanted to do the English Channel, but apparently it's full of jellyfish and poo, so you don't want to.
Not yummy, gross.
Not something. No, so I'll skip that. So what do you mean by self? We talked about self-recognition rather than self-improvement. What do you mean by self?
That's a really hard question.
You can use a metaphor if you like.
Well, like, just when I think of self, I think of a speck, a pebble on a beach, right? So humanity is the beach, and myself, I'm one piece of it, right? And I mean, or a snowflake, right? People use the snowflake thing. We're all like, everyone's unique or whatever, but yeah, I think of it like that. I think that I am, for whatever reason, on the planet at this time, doing this experiment we call humanity. And I'm a part of something bigger. I don't know how to name it or call it. I don't pretend to know. And I think anybody who does, you should question. I'm awareness, I guess. I think that's a deeply, deeply intense question. But that's what I think. I think that I am a physical expression of awareness, consciousness. That's what I am. I'm here on a unique experiment, doing whatever it is I'm doing. So,
yeah.
And I'm not overly attached to purpose either. I'm not, you know, a lot of people say, oh, you got to find who you are so you can find your purpose and give a contribution to the world. And I think me being in love with the experience of being alive is the best contribution I can give to the world.
Brilliant. Brilliant. That feels like a good place to bring it in.
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks, Lily. Thanks, listeners. We'll speak to you soon.
You're so welcome, Simon.
Bye.